Good evening, everyone, and welcome to something extremely special today, which is I will make Hunter items tier list for Fury of Dracula, 3rd and 4th edition. Lately, we got some influx of new players uh, that were even some players that were asking about some basics about the games, how to learn the game and understand it better. So I realized one of the core mechanics of the game that on the one hand like impact how the game's played, but also the meta of the game, understanding of the game impacts on this mechanic are hunter items. So I decided I will make a hunter items tier list, which I think is actually very basic, helps for hunter players, helps for Dracula players, and I think also it is more or less solved, to be honest. Especially we'll go down the line so you see what I mean, that there are some clear distinctions, so some clear guidelines that you can be flexible about, but mm, if you don't know what to do, you will follow this tier list and you should be fine, more or less. And both as Dracula and as hunters, because if as Dracula you know what to expect from hunters, or what is like the best, or what is the most scary for you, it can help you adapt as Dracula player to that gameplay. Uh, First disclaimer is that I know there is some old video by Quincy Morris made about items, but in the long run, to be honest, I don't agree in many of his assignments there. So shots fired, pew pew, which may be a little bit arrogant by me, but I am primarily Dracula player, so I think some level of arrogance is in place. Uh, and also, the second disclaimer is tier lists need to be in a context, because nothing like tier lists are not objective and paramount in every scenario. So, what scenario are we talking about? We are talking specifically about week one. Where hunters are supplying for vast majority of week one. At the end of week one, some hunters start moving, but probably not all of them. And then week two, probably there is still a lot of supplying mixed up with some moving. Mm, if you don't know what I'm talking about, I assume that you know the rules of the game, first of all. I assume that you played few times. You don't expect me to read the items and explain the rules. I will try to go still fairly basic and fairly in detail. But if you're like, this is the first thing that Fury of Dracula, and this is the first thing where you approach, probably not the best. First, like, play a few games, have fun, and then when you lose a few games, maybe you win a few games, and you get some feelings what is happening. Uh, I hope to help you, and also help you with the combat, because combat seems at first very convoluted. Dracula counters what hunters can do. Hunters can counter what Dracula does. There are multiple options for both. But when you like streamline the items and you understand the general directions, it also helps with the combat. So, few disclaimers at the beginning, and yeah, the tier list is specifically when you don't know where Dracula is, most probably when you don't know which hunters we have which role, clearing trail, fighting Dracula at the beginning. Probably you don't really want to fight Dracula necessarily. You just want to protect, like clear the trail and not allow to mature anything. But So yeah, so this is you don't have additional. There's like almost no context, no additional context. You just blindly supply and you draw two items and you discard because your hand is full, but you supply to get better items and to stock some events. And in that context, you can have some clear distinctions when you rank items in a sense. I don't know now what will happen, but in majority of situations, which items are better and stronger. Because sometimes there can be very strong items and be trump but in theory weaker items, but the situation is very specific when you simply need that type of an item. That solves your issue. And then, don't be bound by the tree list like by chains. So how do we do this? We supply items. We don't know where Dracula is. We're just drawing some random stuff from item deck, from event deck. We're supplying, and we drew our fourth item, our next item. We have items to compare. We have to keep something in hand and discard something. Which items are better to be kept, especially at the beginning of the game? Let's start with some most paramount and most clear things, which is meta defining, the most powerful stuff you can basically remove from the game, any of the items, and the game will change, but in some cases in dramatic ways, but not as much as when you would remove or fast horses. Fast horses is the most powerful, the most important, and most paramount to the game item. Fast horses take your item slot, which is quite of a big deal. It requires you to set up the tickets. There's an excellent Scott's video on how hunter movement and fast horses work. If you don't know what I'm talking about, check that out. But basically, fast horses allow you to consistently and reliably move faster than by one road per turn. And is also better than rails because rails sometimes allow you to go further but require you to repurchase ticket. And sometimes you don't have the correct tickets, you're stuck. Sometimes you need night actions to trade, to clear the trail, to heal, and then you have the competing night actions for trading and healing and ticketing and all of that. With fast horses, you move, clear the trail, heal, uh, you are fast, reliable, and have less actions to spend for moving. And more importantly, you can fairly consistent, and if you have perfect ticket economy, a very consistent double road movement, which is extremely scary for Dracula, who in most cases moves by one road a turn. So he moves once, and suddenly a lot of hunters can just catch him. And it is very scary for Dracula because in this game you mostly want, as hunters, to fight multiple hunters versus Dracula. 1v1 combat in many cases favor Dracula. You want to fight mostly 2v1, 3v1, 4v1. This is how you damage and this is how you kill Dracula in most cases. And fast horses allow that. It is much better to be for each hunter to have that one item less, but then to be able to jump Dracula and use some two items in rotation, or even one item and a punch with a bunch of hunters, then one hunter that needs to rail, move, and maybe even never catch Dracula. Like, what does it give you that you're full of items if you never catch Dracula, or following the trail is very difficult, right? You never, basically, almost never. No, you never discard fast horses. I almost said almost never, but there are some scenarios but usually they're not week 1 or week 2 scenarios. You basically never discard fast horses because early in the game it is about setting up your hunters, setting up your items, fast horses, fast horse economy, and events. And when you are set up, then you go after Dracula. So week 1, if even one hunter has all 3 horses, you usually don't want to discard any horse. You even want to avoid Dracula, maybe sometimes forego some maturation on a trail, because when you have hunters set up with the horses, then you can catch up. Then you can work out and get back with the early disadvantage if that happens. But discarding a horse usually sets you on a bigger disadvantage than anything else. So, yeah, fast horses. It may be sometimes difficult to understand at the beginning what's the big deal, but once you play lots of games and you will see how difficult it is to run away as Dracula or build a trail, how easy it is to shift hunters around, adapt to the situation when you have reliable fast horses. It is a complete game changer. Then let's go to the most powerful items, because when we set up as our baseline what is the most powerful and why, it will be easier to understand where other items are, more easier to be discarded or ditched. Which direction we'll go? You know what? Let's talk about stakes. Since we're talking about non-combat items first. Stake role is very simple. You use it while searching to kill a vampire or a hoax encounter when you search a hideout. Stakes are very crucial and very important. You may think like, okay, what's the big deal? The hoaxes and aristocratic vampires, you can kill them anyway. And fighter vampires are like 4 health, 6 health, they're not on level Dracula, we can kill them anyway. On the one hand, you may think so. On the other hand, it can be extremely irritating and slowing down and costly to fight through each fighter vampire. There are 3 reckless vampires that have 4 health and 2 new vampires that have 6 health. It is surprisingly difficult to kill new vampire with a solo hunter. And what do you want to, each time you meet a new vampire, drag 2 hunters to fight it? It slows you down extremely and gives a lot of time for Dracula. And just staking, and you just stake a vampire supply, and you're ready to go. It is fairly easy, and especially it protects you and makes your night actions easy. Night fighting vampires is very scary. Your staff can be broken, you can be dealt 4 damage by a single claw attack, you can get mesmerized and fanged to get a bite point, a lot of unpleasant stuff. And you have stake, you can just safely night search with a stake, and don't be afraid too much until you lose the stake. So stakes are very important and crucial. Having always at least one stake to be prepared for Dracula to that puts down a rumor token, to be sure that Dracula won't get like 6 or 7 points with a single mature, which is a big deal, is helps a lot. Sometimes it happens that you don't have stakes and Dracula sets up city of vampires, and you're giving him points for free, you're letting them mature, or you're going to fight through all of them. These are not pleasant scenarios, and having one stake, two stake is a big deal, especially early in the game. Where we're talking about, we don't know where Dracula is, and you really don't want to give Dracula early advantage and that peace of mind. Oh, he got like 7 points, and adapt to the strategy, and he knows that he needs just to survive to the last week somehow, and then he takes only 2 steps and wins. That puts a lot of pressure on hunters to have some risky plays, can't allow to mature basically anything, or try to close game earlier. And you don't want that pressure. So whenever a hunter gets their first stake, that is usually fairly big of a deal. Second stake, to be honest, is usually very situational, sometimes even trash. So that's the thing about the stakes, that having a stake on a hunter, or in some area like when there's Godalming with Mina or Godalming with Seward, maybe not both of them need to have a stake. Maybe one stake between them is good enough. But sometimes having 2 stakes on 2 hunters is also good, because then your goal is to just, clear the trail and don't bother about Dracula. Just buy some time to be set up. But this early stake is very important, especially when your hunter has spread out. You don't know where the Dracula is, so you can go off with a stake from multiple areas and decide who is the closest best suit to clear the early rumor token, early trail. So this is how you set up like the strategy, let's say, and moving of hunters, because if you're non-combat items, let's go to something juicy. Heavenly Host and Knife. Both seem to be combat items, like specifically used in combat, but to be honest, are quite different and have a little bit different roles. Let's talk first about Heavenly Host. It has actually 3 purposes. One of which to clear desecrated soil. This is a Dracula encounter that can heal Dracula, which is fairly important. Sometimes, like in many games where you play, Dracula health doesn't seem to matter that much, because he either eludes hunters totally and wins, or hunters just jump him and kill him, and yeah, it wasn't even close. But there's a big portion of the game where few hit points, one way or the other, that can define Dracula win or loss. Especially when you consider that desecrated soil heals 3 health. It is very difficult for hunters to deal 3 damage in a combat, It is quite sweaty. You need quite a lot. So just dealing 3 damage to Dracula just like that for free, by just clearing an encounter, it is valuable. Also, there's a very powerful event, most powerful event in the game, Consecrated Ground, that can win the game outright, that can scout multiple locations of for Dracula, that can scout encounters in the locations, that can narrow down Dracula ability to move, that can push Dracula to sea and deal him massive damage, clear trail. It is really terrifying and game defining. Heavenly Hosts with Consecrated Ground are a constant threat to the Dracula whenever hunters have it or not. This is really, again, so game defining that it is hard to describe. You need to experience it yourself, how many of the games you win or lose by a Consecrated Ground, it being full power being used. Still, to be honest, not as game defining as horses, but very game defining. But it is hard to describe in like some simple tier list. You just need to trust me on that and experience it yourself or by watching some videos how hunters win multiple games with consecrated ground. Uh, and the last use of the heavenly host, and maybe worth noting, is that consecrated ground uh, is best used when three different hunters have three heavenly hosts equipped. That is the most powerful. So similar to horses, you want to spread out the heavenly host to collect them all and spread out between hunters. Uh, the the like heavenly host is not as top tier as horses. There are scenarios when you would discard heavenly host. It happens to me sometimes, not rarely, but it does happen. Sometimes you have, let's say, two horses on a hunter and a stake, and you know that there's a rumor token close to the hunter. I could probably discard heavenly host to keep the fast horse, which is super important, and keep stake to get rid of the rumor token. And heavenly host, maybe down the game, it is fairly common, especially on higher level of hunter play, where a hunter player is very efficient with moves, so can supply a lot, to reshuffle the item deck and go through the item deck for the second time. So sometimes you can discard Heavenly Host and get it back later in the game anyway. And last but not least, Heavenly Host as a combat item. The most swingy item in the game, very strong, but very risky. Like whenever someone uses Heavenly Host, there are a lot of emotions. Anyway, it is the most damage in a single action by one item, by a hunter. It deals 4 damage, so it can kill the Reckless Vampire outright. It can deal massive, massive damage to Dracula when 2 hunters use Heavenly Host, when 3 hunters use Heavenly Host. It is 8, 12 damage. So in late game, you just blow up Dracula. What is most important, that usual defensive Dracula combat cards don't stop Heavenly Host. Usually when Dracula wants to stay safe and be on a defense, he plays either Strength to stop basically anything else than Heavenly Host, or Mesmerize to again stop a lot of stuff. And Heavenly Host puts that forking decision on the Dracula. If you have the Heavenly Host and some other stuff, and Dracula knows it, or then it's not like, okay, I play Strength and I'm safe for sure. It's a constant guessing game. Will playing Strength make me safe or not? Because they can blast me with Heavenly Host. But there's the big risk of being fanged. And it is really big risk. Sometimes you can have a winning combat, but Dracula will fang the hunter that uses Heavenly Host and flip the combat, flip the game on its head. A quick recap. If you are playing Heavenly Host, but Dracula is fanging you, Heavenly Host doesn't deal damage, you discard it, you take 2 damage, Dracula heals 2 damage, you get bite, and you get removed from combat. So it happens that sometimes hunters catch Dracula 2v1, are about to win the game, are about to kill him, but Dracula guesses correctly the Heavenly Host, and instead of getting 4 damage, heals 2 damage, and then is left 1v1 versus the second hunter, and game flips on its head. That's why Heavenly Host is really high risk, high reward card. If you are too predictable with using that, it can actually work against you in combat, and it's very risky in combat. For me, I quite like, and I prefer to actually be stocked in weapons in multiple hunters combat. So there will be like no risk that I will get guessed and I will lose the combat. If I have enough hunters with enough weapons, I can just, you know, uh, just bury Dracula under the iron. But sometimes you don't have the luxury of like 3v1, even 2v1, and that heavenly host uh, can give you extra reach, extra damage to just close the job. One important note is that sometimes being fanged into Heavenly Host can be a blessing. If you're like in a 1v1 scenario as Hunter, uh, sometimes you want to for a combat to end because you are afraid of Dracula escaping as bat or maybe killing you with damage. So sometimes you can throw Heavenly Host, and it is somewhat win-win scenario for you. If Dracula will not stop this, then he will get massive damage. But if he will stop this, then combat ends and further risks are avoided. So Heavenly Host, big deal. Various use cases, very flexible, powerful, but fairly risky item. And to compare knife. Knife is the most dangerous combat item because he doesn't have downside like Heavenly Host. He deals 3 damage, so 1 damage less than Heavenly Host, but it can be reused in combat. So you can stab Dracula 2 times in a combat and the damage adds up. The knife is extremely scary. Also, knife is stopping fangs. So if you stop fangs, not only you deal 3 damage, you also prevent Dracula from healing. So it is like net 5 damage. Stupidly powerful item, to be honest. When I'm playing Dracula, I always keep an eye how many knives are around, who has the knives, because knives are the most scary combat threat. Dracula with 1 knife and nothing else can be scary enough, which is like funny enough in itself. Like Hunter having a heavenly host only are not as scary because maybe you can fang them to heal the damage, even if you don't guess. Uh, but along the fight, maybe you can escape as bad. But knife not only stops you from healing, but also it stops escape as bad. And escape as bad is again game-defining combat item bar Dracula. This is something that also you probably need some experience to fully understand, to see how does it look like in the game. But when Dracula escapes as bat from the combat, builds distance, resets its location, you don't know where he is, you need to find it, you need to reach him. Escapes as bat is a very scary and game defining, and that's why it defines the quality of items itself and the quality of knife. Knife is so freaking powerful because it stops fangs and because it stops uh, bats. And these are one of the two most useful things that you can stop, especially that fangs, reckless vampire wants to fang you for points. You have knife, and suddenly maybe you can stop that and deal damage. Dracula mesmerizes you, wants to remove you from combat with fanging, but he doesn't know when you will play the knife. Sometimes we play fangs into knife, and instead of getting points and healing and removing you from combat, you deal him damage. Big deal. This is really big stuff. Knives are freakingly powerful, and to be honest, it is for me quite often to pick knife over heavenly host when I need to discard something. But it depends. And it depends on the hunter's player, on the preferences, and how the player plays. I wouldn't say that overall knife is more important than Heavenly Host. I totally can respect whenever someone says that Heavenly Host is stronger than a knife, but like pure combat power, knife, especially that knife protects you against encounters, which is another important thing. A lot of encounters are very painful when you don't have weapon, and get a lot of their effects are mitigated when Dracula can reveal a weapon. Bodyguards, wolves, spy, to name a few. But I think like these are the most important. The difference between being dealt 2 damage or 4 damage. Uh, remember how fast horses are important and keeping good tickets is important for them. So if you don't have a weapon, you get hit by a spy and you're forced to discard tickets, and your horses are trash now. So it is totally worth to discard, for example, a knife and protect the horses if necessary, right? So that's it. Now, so these are meta-defining and most powerful. What we have next? So when we talked about knife, we talked about stopping uh, escape as bats, and it is hard to fight Dracula when Dracula can escape as bat once the appropriate turn, like ticking clock of the combat, ticking turns come, and Dracula just decides, you know what, I don't want to fight you anymore, end this combat, run away. That's why, like the basic approach, the common approach, it is good for every hunter to have at least one weapon, to also be like on a good terms when clearing encounters, as I mentioned, to be protected against encounters, but also to be able to stop escape as bats, so that whenever you attack Dracula or even walk on him by mistake, or maybe by Dracula's scheme, escaping as bats is not as easy for him because you have a way to stop it. And you know what? This is fairly simple. Rifle. Rifle is very versatile item. It is a weapon, so helps with multiple encounters, also with saboteur and rats. It does stop escape as bats. It can work with bullets. It stops claws, which health on hunters is usually not a primary concern, but against some more aggressive Draculas on some specific scenarios, being able to stop the claws can be a big deal, especially for Helsing, for example, who has lower health pool. So yeah, rifle, very solid item. If you can have hunter with fast horses and 2 rifles, he's decently stocked. It is decent combat power. If you see that someone is fighting Dracula, you can reinforce the combat with a hunter with double rifle. Yeah, this is good. But one of the important things and differences, especially when you fight multiple times and you get some experience in the game, when you realize, why knife is so freakingly more powerful than rifle, because let's say Dracula mesmerizes you, then your rifle goes from 2 damage to a measly weak 1 damage, while knife still does some respectable 2 damage. And it is a big difference. If you're mesmerized, you're not that useful, or if you're mesmerized, you still pose a threat. And if you're mesmerized still, knife can stop things, and Dracula can just decide. If you have only rifles, Dracula can just decide to, yank you out of the fight and heal along the way. So that's why it is not even close in combat power between rifle and knife, but still, you have only 3 knives and there are 4 rifles, so it is good. Like, you can work with rifles. Rifle is good enough item. And so these are the top items. If you are able as a player to just get your item deck at the beginning of the game, you just pull the items that you want, spread them around the hunters. Probably if you were to use only those items, you're good to go. To be honest, you can win like any game of that. So, or most of the games, but it depends on the situation. So this is how those items are flexible, powerful, and useful. Still, a lot of items in this game, when they have surprise effect, they can switch the situation from being like inconvenient or difficult into trivial things just because you happened to have right tool for the right situation. And even if some items are weaker or more situational, it doesn't mean that they are uh, trash, which is interesting to realize. For example, pistol. Pistol is in many cases uh, worse version of the rifle because it stops plotting again instead of escape as bats. So again, at the beginning of the game, you don't know what will happen. It is still early, and Dracula can escape as bats like turn 1 or turn 2. So it is extremely scary. So rifle is much more desirable than pistol. But it doesn't mean that pistol is useful. There are scenarios that pistol can be better than rifle. For example, when you fight uh, fighter vampires because you're out of stake or you were ambushed, yes, stopping plotting can be very useful. And those pesky fighter vampires tend to drag the combat or sometimes escape as missed. So stopping escape as bad is not as paramount against them. Or let's say Dracula is in some narrow space, like in Italy, England, or maybe Spain, then escape as bad may be not as good for him, or maybe even not usable at all. Then pistol, yeah, is slightly better. It can be late in the game where Dracula can only escape turn 4 and turn 5. Sometimes the combat then is so long that escape as bat is not as it's not on the table, to be honest, because you can kill him in 3-4 turns, or the combat will be decided by that time. And being able to sometimes stop the plotting can be game deciding, where as stopping escape as bats may be not useful at all because it will not come to that. So in general, pistol, again, it is a weapon, so useful when clearing encounters. Uh, Deals 2 damage. Decent item. Nothing to be sad. And you know what? Before I go to situational, honorable mention. Sorry, Captain Gyro, but there's one item that is in most cases useless. Even if you use it, it can be useless. Garlic Wretch. I can write poems how useless it is. Sometimes I think it can be more useful to not use it, and for Dracula to sweat what is your last item in hand, what you're hiding. Is it Heavenly Host, and you just suddenly pop it? Is it maybe bullets so your guns are more strong, or like stronger? Maybe it's, I don't know, garlic or crucifix, so it can be scary. So sometimes, like, but when you use the garlic wretch, Dracula knows that you have one less item in hand, and then yes, he doesn't want to fang you right off the bat, right at the start of the combat, because he takes damage. But if it's not he still heals 2, so he takes only 2 damage from the garlic wretch, like net, unless he's full health. But when he has full health and you pop up garlic wretch, then he's laughing. Then again, claws, remove it. You lose it at the end of the fight. If it is night fight and you get mesmerized, Dracula can easily fang, because the fangs will not deal damage. The fang will just bite you, so he doesn't take damage. Too situational of an item, too low benefit too easy to play around, and too high cost because you have like 3 or 4 item slots. And basically anything else in most cases will be more useful. Like I would much rather have garlic on crucifix to actively be able to stop the fangs than garlic wretch, which is yeah, okay, yeah. This is to Discord. And in some cases, I would even consider to not play it at the beginning of the combat, uh, and to make Dracula like keep thinking, what do you have in hand as the last item, and just showing that it is nothing useful. Notably, there is like quote unquote combo Heavenly Host with Garlic Wretch. That okay, if Dracula doesn't flank you, then you just shot him with Heavenly Host safely. But if he fangs you, then at least you deal 4 damage. But you know, if you have Heavenly Host and Garlic Wretch, how you clean the trail, then you do one thing for 4 damage and you have nothing left, right? So it's better to have a pistol, even. Or definitely rifle. Yeah, useless. And then there are situational items. Crucifix, garlic. Both stop fangs, which is decent. Being able to stop fangs can be useful in many like in many situations, especially against reckless. Garlic is a very good defensive item. When you are caught up in a sudden 1v1 fight where you don't really want to fight Dracula because you're not prepared for that, you just want to survive, you don't want to die. Garlic is one of the best things you can have. Albeit, you don't want to have those situations anyway. That's why garlic is down here. You should be playing around and try to not get into such an uncomfortable situations, especially because once Dracula will notice that you have like crucifix or garlic, he knows that he is much safer against like multiple versus ones, because garlic and crucifix, their biggest downfall is that if you fight 2v1 or 3v1 and you show garlic, but Dracula decided to pick someone else for their combat item, you're doing nothing. You're doing less than punch, which is not what you don't want to deal 0 damage when you are in multiple hunters versus one Dracula fight. You want for every hunter to be pumping up damage every turn, so even if Dracula stops one of the hunters with the other hunters keep killing him. So Garlic and Crucifix are like the 1v1 items, but you don't really want in most case scenarios to fight Dracula 1v1, and also in most cases scenario you don't want to fight fighter vampires 1v1 because you have stakes for that. And if you have a knife that deals 3 damage, you can kill fighter vampires like fairly well. Maybe not perfect, but with those items on the top, you can deal with those things in a better way than with those things. That's why they're situational, right? There are specific situations when they'll be very useful and they'll be very cool. Does that hurt him? But we're talking again about in a scenario when you don't know the first week and a half, you don't know where Dracula is, you're just supplying. I would keep like blindly any of the items above than those ones. And this is like beginner player tutorial. If you keep to that, if you don't know what to do, you can keep to that and then get some feeling, get some experience, get some preferences, and experiment. Obviously, do what you want. I try to ease the decision making for people that don't know what to do at the beginning, right? To close up, utility, weird items, holy circle. It can be really cool. It is like a free get out of the jail card. you got into some random fight at night against vampire, you just run away without the risk. You stepped onto Dracula by a mistake or by a trap. You just safely run away, or by, for example, boss encounter. This is cool, but it doesn't cure. It doesn't progress your win conditions. It just makes you safer. Sometimes being safer is good, but if again, this is like the same issue as with these items. Once, if you have those items, it is really hard to kill Dracula. If you have those items, you can jump Dracula 2v1, 3v1, and even if not kill, then cripple him with heavy, consistent damage. Last of the in-combat items, Holy Bullets. In theory, they sound really cool. You bring out your big guns, rifle, pistol, and boom, suddenly you feel 5 damage. 5 damage is extremely a lot. But they are one use, they take up item slot, and your item slots are sparse. And sometimes, when Dracula keeps track of items, it is to be played around, because rifle or pistol with holy bullets is stopped by strength, by mesmerize, and once you are mesmerized, by fangs. So basically 3 things that Dracula wants to play anyway. Like when you're in combat and Dracula is fighting for his life, he wants to be using strength and mesmerize to reduce damage dealt to him and break weapons. He wants to fang to remove hunters from combat. And that's why, sometimes it sounds cool as an idea, and sometimes it works as a surprise, and it is cool. But quite often it can be, okay, you pull out your rifle, you get mesmerized, you pull out your pistol, you're fanged away from combat, or I don't know, it's broken, and and you're running around of items. You're running with, let's say, horse, rifle, and bullets. Your rifle is broken, and you have no items. You can do nothing. And it could be better to have like holy circle or garlic even than the holy bullets. On the other hand, holy bullets is decent at killing fighter vampires or dealing some surprise reach damage for Dracula when it works, like with plant ambush sometimes or stuff like that. So these are items that are not bad if you are able to, if you don't know how the game will go and you're filtering your items, they're too situational to be relied upon. But let's say you have 3 item slot, you just want to supply and run after Dracula or clearing the trail. If you get any of them, decent stuff, especially if you already have a weapon, so you're not that afraid of encounters. Okay, so we're multiple times talking about weapons, how weapons are flexible because they deal damage to Dracula in combat and help clearing the trail. That dual purpose is really, really important thing. So how about doggos? Doggos, for some player, they go straight to trash. I will put them into situational because early, you know what? First, I think why they go to the situational when we talked multiple times how it is important to have weapon. To like every hunter needs to have a weapon to not be afraid of a trail. So why not dogs when they are like better at keeping you safe than weapons from the trail? So weapons deal damage in combat, and dogs don't. And if you don't have weapons, and maybe you don't plan on fighting Dracula, it doesn't matter because Dracula needs to keep in mind that you can fight him if you have enough weapons, if he plays recklessly. But if you have dogs, you lose 1 precious item slot and weakens your combat power, and then Dracula can play around that. But sometimes when, let's say, Dracula is far away and your Helsing is left with duty to clear some trail because, for example, Dracula went to Spain, went to the sea, and moved few sea spaces. So Godalming, Mina, and Stewart are with horses, preparing to catch him after he lands. There are few encounters left. Uh, if and Helsing is left to clear that one or two encounters in Spain. If I have two rifles and supply for a dog, I will gladly discard the rifle to dog because if Helsing is about to be clearing trail and not fighting Dracula, yeah, dogs are decent. But this is not an early game scenario, so this is not week one or week two scenario when you supply. So anything above is in most cases better, especially when you realize that if you have like weapon or two weapons, you're already protected against a lot of stuff that dogs protect you anyway. The only thing, that's why it's also in situational, when I have specifically Steward and he already has, let's say, horse, rifle or knife, maybe heavenly host or stake, his fourth item as dogs is really good because then he can solo single-handedly clear quite a lot of trail without being slowed by saboteurs, without taking too much damage from wolves or rats or anything like that. And sometimes Dracula, annoyed by dogs clearing some of his stuff, starts ambushing you, which leaves your night action free. So yeah, dogs can have a place. In many cases, to be honest, I would consider Holy Circle, Holy Bullets, and dogs as the fourth item for Steward. Once Steward has one set up on the three top items, because they're good utility items when Steward goes and clears the trail, so other hunters can supply, set up their items, set up their tickets. So this is a tier list by me. And I strongly believe that if you are a fairly new player, you played a few games, but you don't know the flow of the game, you don't know how to move the items around. If you just stick to this in every single game, in a week one supplying, then it will ease your pain. And once you learn the game more, maybe you can shift some things around, maybe you have some preferences, and you can also understand your opponents better and what is your plan and what is their plan. This is also important for Dracula because once you are playing Dracula, you can realize that some hunters, for example, some hunter players value stakes extremely highly. Some hunter players have lower value of stakes. Some hunters players play bullets higher, and you need to pay attention to them and play around that. And once you pay close attention to what is their item discard pile, what they're using, it can adapt your strategy. If hunters put a big stress on stakes, it means that, and a lot of their hunters are holding a lot of stakes, it means they're weaker in combat. You can do some riskier stuff and put more combat encounters instead of vampires, right? If you realize that some hunter players realize, you know what, I don't care about fighter vampires that much. I want to have my combat items and then potentially fight the vampires. Yeah, then you can really wreck them by putting a lot of fighter vampires and they just need to drag through the mud and through all the claws and fangs and all of that. Or just give up and give you free maturing points, right? So yeah, some items can move around and it can be totally justified, but it will be like completely different discussion when I will be like talking experienced player and especially in some scenarios, maybe some hunter setups, maybe some scenarios where Dracula is found, maybe also against who you are playing. There are some Dracula players that prefer to hold fighter vampires in hand and then put multiple ones later down the trail. So if you adapt to that, you can you can play differently with those items. Some Dracula players prefer to just have early points, and this is their most important goal for the week one. Then maybe some items go differently, right? But it is already long a video, and I wanted to like keep basic for players that let's say played less than 10 games and just want to have this part of the game be streamlined and easier to follow. Once you have the baseline, then easier to adapt. This is for you. At least I hope you'll find it useful. At least also it will help you to adapt further down the line about how to play the game, both as hunters and as Dracula, what to expect, how to approach also the combat and trail building. If you have that baseline more or less set up and well understood. Let me know what you think. Especially, it really helps if I get any type of feedback, then we can do some more stuff and or adapt to the needs, especially if this is useful and it helps streamline that. And yeah,